They said Christmas was off this year, money's tight, we're keeping it simple at home, so I spent the day alone. That night, my cousin uploaded a video, a packed house, turkey carving, family only on the invites. Everyone was there but me. I didn't say a word until Dad texted, "Can you help with the mortgage this month?" I replied, "Ask the family you picked." Then I stopped every payment and watched the chaos unfold. Can you imagine spending $500,000 on your daughter's dream wedding, only to watch her introduce another man as her father to 350 guests? I'm Jim Hayes, and in that moment, as I sat alone at table 18, I realized everything I thought about my family was a lie. What happened next wasn't just a twist, it was a reckoning. For 26 years, I poured my heart and soul into raising Victoria. Scraped, saved, worked myself to the bone. Every dance recital, every scraped knee, every late-night conversation, every sacrifice. I made sure she had every opportunity. I paid for private school, then Yale, a full $68,000 a year for 4 years. Then her Manhattan apartment, another $3,000 a month. And now I was footing the bill for this lavish wedding, the $180,000 venue, $85,000 catering, $28,000 flowers, a $15,000 string quartet, a $12,000 photographer, an $8,500 cake, the works. All of it, every single penny from my bank account. But here's the thing, Victoria, in her desperate climb up the social ladder, had made one crucial mistake. She erased me. She introduced a complete stranger, Richard Morrison, to the Whitmore family, and to everyone, as her beloved father, the man who shaped her, who instilled her values. Meanwhile, I, the simple plumber, the actual man who paid for it all, was strategically seated at table 18, by the kitchen door, an embarrassment to be tucked away. The Ashford Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut. Saturday, June 15, 2024, 4:30 p.m. I pulled my Ford F-150 into a valet line packed with Bentleys and Mercedes. The young valet, probably no older than 20, looked at my truck like I'd just hauled in a dead fish. My rental tuxedo, $89 for the day, felt like a costume. But you know what? I could tell the difference between quality and pretense because I'd built a business from nothing. I'd earned every damn cent inside. Those $25,000 crystal chandeliers glittered over Greenwich's elite. Victoria, my beautiful daughter, floated through the crowd in her $32,000 Vera Wang gown. She saw me. Our eyes met. Then she looked away. The wedding planner, clipboard in hand, directed me to table 18. By the kitchen door, where the catering staff rushed back and forth. Yeah, that was me. Table 18. Meanwhile, Victoria was at table 1, center stage with her new family, the Whitmores. Preston Whitmore III, her husband-to-be, heir to old money, generations old. My table filled with distant relatives and plus ones. Nice people, but not the kind who'd ever grace the Connecticut Society pages. We made polite small talk about the weather, the beautiful venue. Nobody asked what I did. Probably for the best. 26 years. 26 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, dance recitals. I missed 3 birthdays because of emergency plumbing calls. Pipes don't wait for convenient times. But I always made it up to her. Always. I gave her everything. And now she was ashamed of it all. Ashamed of the hands that built her future. She had no idea what Hayes Plumbing and Property Solutions truly meant. Started in '94 with a used van and a toolbox. 16-hour days, 7 days a week, for 5 years straight. Peanut butter sandwiches and sheer stubbornness. But I didn't just fix pipes. I listened. I bought buildings from customers selling out, fixed them up, rented them out. Now, 23 locations. Last year's revenue, $8.9 million. My net worth certified by my CPA? Same figure. Victoria thought I was still just the guy who came home with dirty hands. The guy who embarrassed her at parent-teacher conferences in his work clothes. The guy who wasn't sophisticated enough for her Yale friends. She had no clue that her simple plumber dad owned more property than half the people in that room. If I stayed silent tonight, I wouldn't just lose money. I'd lose my self-respect. I'd teach her that family loyalty was negotiable, that you could build a marriage on lies, that shame was an acceptable cost for social status. No, not my daughter. Not like this. In my jacket pocket, I had the papers. Bank statements showing the $500,000 transfer for the wedding, contracts with my signature as the sole guarantor, email threads with the wedding planner, 23 messages over 4 months, all addressed to Mr. Hayes and all copied to Victoria. She knew. She knew exactly who was paying for this fairy tale. My attorney, Richard Polson, sat a few tables away, flown in from Florida just in case. He thought I was paranoid. She's your daughter, Jim. This is just wedding stress. But Richard hadn't been invisible at table 18. Catherine Brooks, the venue manager, kept glancing my way. She knew. She knew who signed the checks. When vendors had problems, they called me. I was the client. I held the contracts. I had the authority. The Whitmores, with their inherited wealth, thought their reputation made them untouchable. They'd never dealt with someone who built his power from the ground up, one satisfied customer at a time. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Daddy, please don't mention the plumbing business tonight. This is important to me. 30 years of sacrifice, reduced to an embarrassment. The decision solidified right then. Some lessons, you just have to learn the hard way. 7:15 p.m. The cocktail hour was in full swing, and the social ecosystem was revealing itself in all its polished cruelty. Margaret Henderson, whose flooded basement I'd personally fixed, Dr. James Walsh, whose medical building we'd renovated, Sarah Chin, whose restaurant plumbing I'd handled on Christmas Eve. They all approached my table. Jim Hayes, Margaret exclaimed, her face lighting up. I didn't expect to see you here. Father of the bride, I said simply. Her expression shifted, confusion, understanding, then sympathy. Oh my. Victoria never mentioned. She keeps her private life private, I replied. But her voice had carried. Conversations paused. Eyes turned. The whispers started. That's the plumber. Victoria's father. I thought he was dead? Within minutes, the stories spread like spilled wine on white linen. Faces changed, surprise, awkwardness. Some genuine pity. Most just discomfort. Preston Whitmore Sr. noticed the commotion. 72, silver-haired, bespoke suit. He approached my table with the arrogant stride of a man who'd never been denied anything. You must be Jim, he said, extending a manicured hand. Preston Whitmore. Victoria's told us so much about you. A polite lie. Victoria had told them nothing. Have we met? He pressed. You look familiar. I fixed your kitchen pipes last March, I told him. Emergency call Sunday morning. You were hosting a charity brunch. His smile flickered, just for a second. Then it returned, more forced. Ah, yes. Well, you do excellent work. Victoria is fortunate to have such a practical father. Practical. Not successful. Not accomplished. Practical. Like a tool you keep in the garage. He patted my shoulder, condescending, dismissive, and walked away. But the damage was done. The entire room now knew the bride's father was the help. I watched Victoria across the room. She'd seen it all, the conversation, the whispers. Her face went red, then pale. She snapped something at Preston III, who immediately looked my way, not with friendliness, but with cold assessment, calculating the threat. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. Champagne flowed. White orchids from Hawaii filled the air. But the mood had shifted. What was elegant anticipation now thrummed with tension. Guests kept glancing between my corner table and Victoria's center stage position. The math didn't add up, and everyone knew it. Catherine Brooks, the venue manager, appeared at my elbow. Mr. Hayes, is everything all right? Professional concern. She knew which signature was on the contracts. Everything's perfect, Catherine. If you need anything at all, she stressed, please let me know immediately. She understood the delicate dynamics. Preston III then made his way over, 28 years old, Harvard MBA, trust fund baby. His handshake was weak, the grip of someone who'd never held anything heavier than a golf club. Sir, he said, I want to thank you for raising such an incredible woman. She is incredible, I agreed. Victoria mentioned you've had some challenges over the years. Challenges. Like working for a living was a character flaw. We all have challenges, I said. Of course, but I want you to know she'll never have to worry about money again. The Whitmore family takes care of our own. Our own. Like Victoria had been adopted out of poverty, not chosen to abandon her family. That's generous of you, I said. Family is everything to us. Blood or otherwise. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. She'd never truly be one of them. She'd always be the girl they rescued from working-class obscurity. Preston III smiled, the kind of smile sharks probably wore before feeding, and returned to his table. But he missed something. My attorney, Richard Poulson, was already walking toward the stage. Victoria caught my eye. For a moment, our gazes locked. I saw real fear there. Not social anxiety, but true, gut-wrenching fear. Her carefully constructed world was about to crumble. She'd built this new life on lies, on borrowed sophistication. She'd traded family love for social acceptance. She'd chosen status over substance. But she'd forgotten the most important rule of any transaction: always know who holds the real power. And tonight, she was about to learn that power isn't inherited. It's earned. My phone buzzed again. Final payment confirmation required by 9 p.m. Catherine Brooks, venue manager. I glanced at my watch. 8:45 p.m. The ceremony would start in 15 minutes. Victoria's perfect timeline. But timelines can change when you're the one holding the checkbook. Richard Poulson caught my eye, tapped his briefcase. Inside were documents that could unravel this entire evening in minutes. Contracts, bank statements, emails, the paper trail proving exactly who was making this fairy tale possible. Catherine Brooks approached my table again, this time with 2 assistant managers. Mr. Hayes, she said quietly, could we speak privately? We stepped aside. Sir, we've had some inquiries about the final payment schedule. The catering team needs confirmation on the outstanding balance. $340,000. The contract specified payment before service begins. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. Hayes Property Solutions business account. A balance that would make most people dizzy. And a pending transfer for the catering. Scheduled for 9:15 p.m. No problem at all, I said, as long as the service meets the standards we agreed upon. Catherine's professional facade shifted. She understood. Of course, sir. Everything will be perfect. I'm counting on it. As she walked away, I noticed how her team watched me, not with casual attention, but with the focused concern they'd give their actual client. They understood something, though. Whitmore's hadn't figured out yet. In business, signatures matter more than surnames. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Hayes, this is David Chin from Fairfield County Social Register. We're covering the wedding tonight. I'm not interested in interviews. Actually, sir, I was calling about the catering situation. I understand there's been some confusion about the payment structure. Word travels fast. No confusion, I said. Everything's exactly as it should be. Will the reception proceed as scheduled? Chin wasn't calling about social coverage. Someone had tipped him off. You'll have to wait and see, I said, and hung up. Preston Whitmore Sr. was holding court, regaling guests with stories of his new $2 million yacht. Old money loves an audience. But old money also makes assumptions. They assume a working-class man in a borrowed tuxedo poses no real threat. Tonight, they were about to learn the difference between having money and controlling it. The ceremony was about to begin. Victoria's moment of triumph. But every perfect moment depends on someone keeping the lights on, and I was holding the switch. 8:45 p.m. Dinner service was in full swing. Preston Whitmore Sr. stood to give his toast. Friends, family, and honored guests, he began, his voice dripping with old money authority. Tonight we celebrate not just the union of 2 young people, but the joining of 2 families. Polite applause. Victoria, he continued, turning to her, you have brought such joy to our family. Your grace, your intelligence, your character, these are the qualities that make us proud to call you our daughter. The phrase hit like a physical blow. But I especially want to thank the man who raised you to be the remarkable woman you are today. Preston Sr. raised his glass, looking directly at Richard Morrison, the distinguished stranger. To Victoria's father, a man who embodies everything we admire about integrity and dignity. The room erupted. 350 people rose, glasses raised toward a man who had never changed Victoria's diaper, never stayed up all night when she had a fever, never sacrificed a single thing for her. Victoria beamed, tears streaming, mouthing, "I love you, Daddy," to Morrison. 26 years of fatherhood, erased with a single toast. Victoria often tells us how fortunate she is to have been raised by such a principled man, Preston Sr. continued. How his guidance shaped her into someone who understands the importance of family loyalty and doing what's right. In a world where so many young people lack proper role models, Victoria had the blessing of a father who taught her the difference between class and mere wealth. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Richard Morrison, he gestured grandly, "Thank you for giving us the gift of your daughter. Tonight we officially welcome her into the Whitmore family, knowing that the values you instilled in her will guide her for the rest of her life." The applause was thunderous. No one looked at me. I sat at table 18, invisible. But then something shifted. Margaret Henderson stood frozen, glass halfway to her lips. Dr. Walsh looked confused. Sarah Chin stopped applauding, staring directly at me with growing outrage. They remembered our conversation. They knew. Catherine Brooks, phone in hand, watched my table with barely concealed anxiety. The catering staff paused. Their supervisor glanced at his watch. 9 p.m. Final payment deadline. Preston Sr. concluded, "To Victoria and Preston, may their marriage be as blessed as the family that raised her." The room exploded in celebration. Guests surged toward Morrison. Victoria hugged him tightly. But David Chin from the Social Register stood near the exit, photographer beside him, sensing a bigger story. Chen's phone was out, recording. Richard Pole's son was near the stage, briefcase in hand. Our eyes met. He nodded. "Ready." My phone buzzed. "Sir, we need to speak immediately. Payment issues." Catherine Brooks. I stood up from table 18. A few guests noticed. Margaret Henderson. Dr. Walsh, pale. I walked slowly toward the stage. Each step deliberate, final. Victoria saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and in that instant, she saw it in my expression. Not disappointment, not hurt. Resolution. Preston III stepped protectively closer to his new wife. Preston Sr. continued basking in applause, oblivious. Catherine Brooks moved. Her team spread out. The catering staff quietly stopped serving. David Chin raised his camera. I reached the edge of the stage. Preston Sr. finally noticed me, his smile faltering. He probably thought I was coming to thank him. He had no idea I was coming to introduce myself. I reached for the microphone. "Excuse me," I said. The room didn't quiet immediately. But those closest to the stage noticed. A man in an ill-fitting tuxedo, approaching the microphone. Preston Sr.'s expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Sir, I'm not sure this is. My name is Jim Hayes," I said, my voice carrying across the room through the sound system. "And I'm Victoria's father." The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused. 350 people stared. Victoria went white. Preston III stepped forward. I held up my hand. "For the past 30 minutes, you've been celebrating the wonderful father who raised my daughter." I gestured toward Richard Morrison, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "That man has never met Victoria before tonight." Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." "Preston," I continued, looking directly at Whitmore Sr., "I appreciate your kind words about integrity and values, but you directed them at the wrong person." Richard Pole's son appeared, briefcase open. He handed me a folder. Bank statements, contracts, email printouts. Evidence. "This is the contract for tonight's venue," I said, holding it. Up, signed by James Hayes. That's me. "This is the catering agreement for $85,000. Also signed by James Hayes. The flowers, $28,000. The string quartet, $15,000. every single vendor agreement for this evening. I could see faces shifting from confusion to understanding. Margaret Henderson grimly nodded. Dr. Walsh looked sick. The total cost of this wedding is $500,000. Every penny paid by Hayes Property Solutions. That's my company. The room was dead silent. Even the catering staff froze. Hayes Property Solutions, I continued, is a company I built over 30 years. We started with residential plumbing and grew into commercial property management. 23 locations, $8.9 million in annual revenue. Not bad for a simple plumber. Catherine Brooks approached the stage. Mr. Hayes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, we need to discuss the final payment authorization. Perfect timing, I replied. Of course, Catherine. You need the final $340,000 before you can complete tonight's service. Preston Sr. looked confused. What final payment? Everything was arranged. Everything was arranged by me, I said. Through my attorney, my accountant, and my business manager. The Whitmore family has no financial involvement in tonight's celebration. I turned back to the crowd, many now recording with their phones. For 6 months, Victoria asked me not to mention my work at wedding events. She was embarrassed that her father was just a plumber. She wanted to fit in with her new family's social circle. I understood that. I wanted her to be happy. Victoria's tears were flowing freely now, but not tears of joy. But tonight, she went one step further. She told you all that her father was dead. She introduced a complete stranger as the man who raised her. She erased 26 years of our relationship to maintain her social status. The crowd was restless. Whispers. Shocked expressions. Phones recording. Preston, I said, addressing Whitmore Sr. directly. You spoke beautifully about family loyalty and doing what's right. You praised the values that shaped Victoria. But you gave credit to the wrong man. I held up a printed email thread. These are communications between Victoria and the wedding planner. 23 emails over 4 months. Victoria was copied on every message. She knew exactly who was funding her dream wedding. David Chin was recording everything. So now we come to the final payment, I said, addressing Catherine, but loud enough for everyone. $340,000 to complete tonight's service. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded check. The final payment Catherine needed. The check that would keep the reception running smoothly. The room held its breath. Catherine, as the client whose signature appears on every contract, I have a question. Does this venue provide service to people who are ashamed of their families? Catherine looked trapped. Sir, because I'm not interested in funding a celebration of my own humiliation. I looked at the check. $340,000. Signed and ready. Then I tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper cut through the silent room like a gunshot. The contracts are void, I announced. No final payment means no continued service. I believe that's standard hospitality industry practice. Victoria screamed. Not a cry of surprise. A full-throated scream of panic and rage. You can't do this, she shouted. This is my wedding. Yes, I said calmly. It was. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Victoria launched herself toward the stage, her $32,000 gown trailing behind her like a silk accusation. Daddy, you can't. Please, there has to be another way. But there wasn't. That's what she'd never understood about business. When you make certain choices, you eliminate certain options. When you burn bridges, you can't walk back across them. Preston 3 grabbed my arm. You're insane. You can't destroy my wife's wedding over some petty grudge. It's not a grudge, I said, shaking off his grip. It's a lesson in consequences. Catherine Brooks was already on her radio, speaking rapid-fire instructions. Attention all stations. Service suspension in effect immediately. Secure all payments. Contact vendor supervisors. The catering staff began clearing tables with professional efficiency. Servers collected wine glasses. The string quartet stopped mid-piece. Preston Sr.'s face went purple. This is outrageous. I'll have you arrested. I'll sue you for everything you're worth. On what grounds? Richard Polson stepped forward, briefcase still open. My client fulfilled his contractual obligations. He paid $260,000 upfront. The final payment was contingent on satisfactory service completion. The service was satisfactory, was it? I asked. Because part of the service I paid for was treating my family with respect. That didn't happen. Dr. Walsh approached the stage, face grim. Jim, I owe you an apology. I should have said something earlier. No apology needed, James. You're not responsible for my daughter's choices. But other guests were reacting differently. Heated conversations. Despicable behavior. How could she do that to her own father? The Whitmores should have known. David Chin was interviewing guests. His photographer capturing every moment of the collapse. This wouldn't just be local gossip. It would be documented. Published. Permanent. Victoria collapsed into a chair, her perfect wedding dress pooling around her like spilled champagne. 26 years, she sobbed. You're throwing away 26 years over one night. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. You already did that when you told 350 people I was dead. The venue emptied rapidly. Guests gathered their belongings, heading for the exits. Some offered quiet words of support. Others just wanted to escape the drama. The old money crowd particularly seemed uncomfortable with such raw displays of emotion. Preston Whitmore Sr. made one final attempt at control. Hayes, let's be reasonable. Name your price. Whatever you want. Money, property, business connections. We can work this out. You think this is about money? I asked. Everything's about money. That's where you're wrong. I folded the torn check pieces and put them in my pocket. This is about something you can't buy. Respect. Catherine Brooks approached me one last time. Mr. Hayes, your account shows the venue rental and initial catering payments were processed successfully. The incomplete final payment voids the extended service agreement, but the facility usage through 10 p.m. remains valid. Professional to the end. Thank you, Catherine. You and your staff have been excellent. For what it's worth, she said quietly, in 20 years of managing events, I've never seen someone handle dignity under pressure quite like you did tonight. Within 30 minutes, the elegant celebration had transformed into an empty ballroom. Victoria sat alone at table 1. Her husband and new in-laws huddled in urgent conversation near the exit. Preston III kept glancing at his wife with something that looked like disappointment, maybe even disgust. This wasn't the sophisticated family he'd thought he was marrying into. Richard Morrison, the fake father, had slipped out early. Victoria, I said, approaching her table. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Are you happy now? You've ruined everything. I didn't ruin anything, I said quietly. I just stopped paying for it. She wiped her nose with a cloth napkin that probably cost more than most people's dinner. 30 years building your precious business, and you destroy it all in one night. My business will be fine. It's built on real relationships with real people who value honest work. But your marriage. I glanced toward the Whitmores. That might be a different story. Preston III was gesturing angrily at his father, his voice carrying across the now empty ballroom. You said you'd handled the financial arrangements. You said everything was covered. We assumed, Preston Sr. began. You assumed wrong. Preston III snapped. Do you have any idea how this looks? My wife's father just publicly humiliated our entire family. Victoria flinched at the word, humiliated. The social register reporter got everything, Preston III continued. Photos, quotes, financial details. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Greenwich will know we hosted a wedding we couldn't afford to pay for. That was the real wound. Not that Victoria had lied. Rich people lie about inconvenient relatives all the time. The problem was the lie had been exposed publicly, dramatically, with evidence. In their world, image was everything, and their image was now permanently stained. Richard Pohl's son packed his briefcase. Jim, legally speaking, you're completely protected. All contracts were properly executed. The payment structure was clearly defined. No court would find fault with your actions. Thanks, Richard. But personally speaking, he added, that was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, or the most devastating. Maybe both. Victoria stood slowly, her dress rustling in the empty ballroom. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to wait for me to come home from work. I loved you, she said. Despite everything, I loved you. Past tense. You just destroyed my marriage before it even started. No, Victoria, I corrected. You did that when you chose shame over family. I just made the consequences visible. The Whitmores finished their conference and approached. Preston III's face was cold, calculating. The romantic room had been replaced by a businessman assessing losses. Victoria, he said, we need to discuss our options. What options? Damage control, media management, financial restructuring. He glanced at me dismissively. This situation is manageable, but it will require significant adjustments to our original plans. Even now, corporate euphemisms. Their marriage wasn't wounded. It required adjustments. Their humiliation wasn't devastating. It was manageable. Victoria looked between her husband and her father. For the first time all evening, she seemed to see both men clearly. Preston III represented everything she thought she wanted: status, security, acceptance into a world where appearance mattered more than substance. I represented everything she'd been trying to escape: working-class origins, earned rather than inherited wealth, values that couldn't be bought or borrowed. I need to think, she said. Think quickly, Preston III replied. The longer this story circulates, the harder it becomes to contain. He wasn't asking if she was okay. He wasn't apologizing for his family's role. He was managing a public relations crisis. Catherine Brooks appeared one final time. Mr. Hayes, the venue is secured. Your remaining items will be stored safely overnight. Thank you, Catherine. For what it's worth, she said quietly, in 20 years of managing events, I've never seen someone handle dignity under pressure quite like you did tonight. As we prepared to leave, Victoria called out one last time. Daddy, will you ever forgive me? I stopped at the ballroom entrance and looked back at my daughter, standing alone in her wedding dress amid the empty tables and cold chandeliers. Victoria, forgiveness isn't something you ask for once and receive forever. It's something you earn every day through your choices. What does that mean? It means the next move is yours. The story broke in the Fairfield County Social Register Sunday morning. David Chen's article ran with the headline, Wedding of the Season Ends in Financial Drama as Bride's Father Cancels Payment. It had photos, quotes, detailed costs. By noon, it was everywhere. By evening, it had gone national. Victoria called me at 7 a.m., her voice raw from crying. It's everywhere, Daddy. Everyone's talking about it. What are people saying? I asked. Some are calling you a hero. Others are saying you're vindictive and cruel. She paused. The Whitmores aren't talking to me. What about Preston? He's evaluating our situation. His words. Like she was a risky business investment. Victoria, what did you expect? You built your marriage on lies. Lies have consequences. I know that now. By Monday morning, the financial implications were clear. The Ashford estate was pursuing the Whitmores for the unpaid balance. Vendors who had extended credit based on reputation were demanding immediate payment. Preston Whitmore Sr. called me directly Tuesday afternoon. Hayes, we need to settle this like gentlemen. I thought we already did. This publicity is damaging both our families. My business relationships are suffering. My son's marriage is under strain. That's unfortunate. I'm prepared to offer compensation for the financial inconvenience you experienced. He still didn't understand. He still thought it was about money. Preston, you can't buy your way out of this. Your family participated in erasing me from my daughter's life. Money won't fix that. Then what do you want? I want Victoria to decide who she really is, and I want you to stay out of that decision. The social consequences rippled through Greenwich. The Whitmores found themselves disinvited. Their charity board positions were restructured. Preston III, it turned out, had married Victoria partly because his family saw her as a project, a beautiful girl from modest circumstances who could be molded into a proper society wife. The discovery that her circumstances weren't modest at all, and that she lied about her family for acceptance, undermined everything he thought he knew about her. Margaret Henderson stopped by my office Thursday. Jim, I owe you an apology. When I saw you at that wedding, I should have spoken up immediately. You don't owe me anything, Margaret. Yes, I do. We all do. Everyone who worked with you, who knew what kind of man you were, and who stayed silent while they tried to erase you. She wasn't the only one. Dr. Walsh sent a letter. Sarah Chin called personally. Customers reached out to express support. The working-class community that had always known my worth rallied around the principal. And the most interesting response? 3 business owners contacted Hayes Property Solutions about partnerships. A commercial real estate developer wanted to discuss joint ventures. A regional bank requested a meeting. The publicity that was supposed to embarrass me had actually enhanced my professional reputation. Standing up for your principles, even at significant personal cost, was seen as a strength, not a weakness. Victoria and Preston III attended marriage counseling for 2 weeks before he filed for annulment. His grounds: fraudulent misrepresentation of family background and financial status. Legal documents that would become part of the public record, ensuring her deception followed her forever. She moved back to her Manhattan apartment, the one I'd been paying for. For the first time in months, she was truly alone with the consequences of her choices. Friday evening, she called again. The annulment papers came through today. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you really, Victoria? I never wanted your marriage to fail. I wanted it to be built on truth. Well, now I have nothing. No husband, no family, no reputation. You have the same thing you've always had, I told her. The choice to be who you really are instead of who you think people want you to be. And if I make that choice, if I stop being ashamed of where I came from, then maybe we can start rebuilding what we lost? It's only too late when one of us stops breathing. Until then, there's always tomorrow. The line went quiet. I'll think about it, she finally said. That's all I've ever asked for. 6 weeks later, Victoria knocked on my office door. Not my home, but my office. Hayes Property Solutions. Suite 101. The headquarters of the business empire she'd been too ashamed to acknowledge. She looked different. Simpler. Her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Jeans and a sweater, not designer clothes. Most importantly, her expression had changed. The artificial sophistication was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years: genuine uncertainty. Hi, Daddy. Hello, Victoria. Can we talk? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. The same desk where I'd planned her wedding payments. The same chair where she'd sat as a teenager complaining about homework. How are you doing? I asked. Honestly? Terrible. The annulment made the papers. I lost my job at the gallery. Too much negative publicity. Most of my friends from the Whitmore circle won't return my calls. She took a deep breath. But you know what? Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend to be someone else every day? To monitor every word, every gesture, every opinion, to make sure it fits the image you're supposed to project. I waited. She needed to say this in her own words, at her own pace. I've been thinking about what you said. About earning forgiveness through daily choices. She looked around my office, taking in the awards, the photos of completed projects, the evidence of 3 decades of honest work. I want to make different choices now. What kind of choices? I want to work. Real work. Not managing social events or picking out flowers for charity galas. I want to learn the business that built everything I took for granted. I studied her face, looking for performance. But what I saw was exhaustion mixed with determination. The look of someone who'd hit bottom and decided to climb back up. The business isn't glamorous, Victoria. It's early mornings, difficult customers, and problems that don't have elegant solutions. I know. I've been reading about property management, about commercial leasing, about building maintenance. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can contribute something real. What about your trust fund lifestyle? Your Manhattan apartment. I gave up the apartment. I'm staying at an extended stay hotel until I can afford something modest. She managed a weak smile. Turns out when your father cuts off your funding and your husband annuls your marriage, you learn about budgets pretty quickly. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd thought was permanently lost: pride in my daughter. There's a junior position open in our residential services division. Customer service, some basic project coordination. It pays $38,000 a year. That's more than I've ever earned in my life. It's also more than most people your age earn without experience. But you'd be starting at the bottom, reporting to managers who are younger than you, dealing with customers who might recognize you from the newspaper coverage. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about redemption or making up for past mistakes. This is about whether you genuinely want to build something worthwhile or whether you're just looking for another form of security. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. 6 months ago, I would have said I wanted security, she admitted. But security based on pretense isn't really security at all. It's just delayed disappointment. She met my eyes directly. I want to build something real, even if it's small, even if it takes years. The job starts Monday, 8 a.m. Dress code is business casual, not country club casual. I'll be there. As she stood to leave, Victoria paused at the door. Daddy, thank you. For the job. For teaching me that self-respect isn't something you can inherit or marry into. It's something you have to earn. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she was 16. And then she walked out to begin the hardest work she'd ever done, becoming someone she could be proud of. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or did Victoria get exactly what she deserved? What would you have done in my place? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it.